Tune in at 1 p.m. on Talk Radio 102.3.
Welcome back. The time is 11:25. You can give us a call at 423-267-1023. You're listening to Fred the Show on Talk Radio 102.3 WGOW. This is Drew Johnson filling in for Jeff Stiles. I am the Free Press opinion page editor for the Chattanooga Times Free Press, the conservative, the right side of the opinion section. And one thing I've written about that's gotten a lot of kind of pushback and a lot of discussion and interest is the death penalty. And of course, most conservatives, most self-proclaimed conservatives, which I of course am, say that the death penalty is a great thing. Say that it prevents crime. Say that it's something that we need to do. And tonight, the state of Georgia will kill a man. Barring an intervention by the Supreme Court, which doesn't seem likely at this point, Warnley Hill, a convicted murderer, will be put to death for killing his girlfriend, and then years later in prison, he gruesomely killed a fellow inmate while he was in prison. And the real issue here for me is that as a conservative, I don't feel that the government should be empowered to kill its own citizens. And the other thing with Warnley Hill is that, as one federal judge put it, 7 mental health experts have evaluated him, and all 7 say that he is mentally retarded. He tests as mentally retarded. So with that said, I want to bring on an expert in the on the subject. Marc Hyden is a national advocacy coordinator for the conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Let me do a better job with that, Mark. Conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Mark, I appreciate having you on the show.
Drew, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on Chattanooga radio, especially since I grew up in Cleveland, Tennessee.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Well, you're in Georgia now, so that makes you somebody who's sort of an expert on what's going on with the Warnley Hill situation. Tell us a little bit about conservatives. Conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Tell us a little bit about your organization.
Sure. Well, we're just an ever-growing national network of conservatives who came together because we don't believe capital punishment aligns with our conservative principles at all. We want to shatter the myth, the stereotype that's floating around out there that all conservatives support the death penalty, because that's patently false, and I reject that notion in its entirety. We're also increasing the dialogue among conservatives and providing a forum to do that, and as well as engaging in grassroots and grass tops outreach.
Are there a growing number of conservatives that are against the death penalty?
Absolutely. I mean, we have people like Jay Sekulow that's come out, opposed the death penalty. Brent Bozell has major issues, and conservative leader Richard Viguerie as well believes that there's no place for the death penalty in America today.
But sort of playing devil's advocate here, Mark, doesn't the death penalty reduce violent crime? Aren't lives saved because of the death penalty?
Absolutely not. Two of the most recent studies, which were the largest, one was from the National Research Council, these are nonpartisan, came out and said that there is no credible evidence that the death penalty actually deters any crime.
It seems silly to think that somebody's going to be in the middle of killing someone and think, oh, damn, I should probably stop doing this because I might face the death penalty. That's always struck me as just bizarre.
And I absolutely agree with you, but when you look at how long the appeals process, too, is, they're definitely not going to say, oh, I shouldn't do this. 50 years from now, I may be executed.
Right. And the appeals process, as I know, it's something that you guys are concerned about because of the cost. As a fiscal conservative, it's something that I'm certainly aware of. Talk a little bit about that cost to taxpayers.
Sure. Well, it's not just the appeals process. In a capital trial, there's actually 2 trials. There's one to decide the verdict, and then there's another to decide whether or not they can face the death penalty. Now, these are usually twice as long as normal trials in many cases. There's more motions, there's more specialists, there's more time spent by attorneys. So the costs just snowball when you add all that together. Then there's an appeals process that can take decades. And also they're housed on death row, which is more expensive than in general population. So this is far more expensive on every level of the process than, say, a case with life without parole as the penalty.
And besides the expense, we're seeing more and more that with technological improvements, with improvements in DNA, we're seeing more people being exonerated. In Tennessee, we had the example of Paul House, of course. Talk a little bit about that as one of your concerns. Are you concerned about innocent people being put to death?
Well, I talk about cost a lot. I love talking about dollars and cents, but personally, I'm a pro-life conservative, so innocent life is number one for me. That's my number one issue here. So killing innocent people is unacceptable. I don't care if you're conservative, liberal, centrist, anything in between. But the last statistic I saw was for every 10 people that are executed, at least one is released because they're wrongfully convicted. And that should make us all incredibly uncomfortable. That is not a statistic that should make us feel good. Now, I have heard, well, we live in the day of technology and DNA and forensics, and that should be our fail-safe, but that's not true. Only about 5% of all death penalty cases have DNA evidence that's available.
We've got a call, if you don't mind taking a call, Mark, from Eric. Eric,
sure.
You're on the line.
Yeah, I just had a question. When it comes to the death penalty and stuff, and I assume most of these people that are put on death row or put on the sentence to death actually go before trial. Wouldn't it be the people that actually sentence them and not the government to death? Isn't it done by like a group of peers and not it's taken out of, when it's gone to a juror, isn't it taken out of the government's hand?
Mark? Well, there's actually a process set in place for that. If you don't believe in capital punishment, you're not allowed to serve on the trial. That's a piece that the government's put into place, which it's not exactly a jury of your peers if they all support death penalty. Then there's the appeals process that the government has in place that makes it very hard to introduce new evidence, because the appeals process is only to see whether you had a fair trial, not to introduce new evidence, which comes up with disturbing frequency. So there's processes that are put in place by the government that are very unfair and make it a very scary process.
Mark, we're joined by Marc Hyden, who's the National Advocacy Coordinator for conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Tonight, if you're not aware, the state of Georgia will kill a man, Warren Hill, a convicted murderer. And Warren Hill is sort of a very unique case, and Mark, I hope you can talk about this. He actually has an IQ of 70. He is essentially mentally disabled. 70 and below is considered mentally retarded, and all 7 mental health experts who have seen him say that he is mentally retarded, mentally incapable, or less capable. And what does that say about us as a society, Mark, if we're willing to put somebody to death that by federal law shouldn't be put to death anyway?
Well, that's very troublesome. And I would like to say that I'm not an attorney, so I'm not a legal expert, and there's many aspects of this case I'm not intimately aware of. But I'm a conservative guy. I used to work for the NRA, multiple GOP campaigns, and as a Republican Georgia State Senate staffer. So I'm personally a proponent of limited and principled government. But if Warren Hill is executed, those are the actions of an unprincipled and very big government. The Supreme Court ruled, Atkins versus Virginia in 2002, that a, quote, mentally retarded person shall not be executed. The state of Georgia even has a law in the books that states you cannot execute a mentally disabled person. And as you've stated a few times, 7 medical professionals said that Warren Hill is indeed mentally disabled. So if the judicial system is determined, or the judicial system is determined to kill this man, regardless of Supreme Court decisions, regardless of state statutes, and regardless of medical professionals' opinions. So to me, this is the government, the judicial system, saying they can cherry-pick the laws and Supreme Court decisions they want to abide by because they're above the law and we're their subjects. And, Drew, I, for one, reject that notion. The government must consistently follow the laws and decisions put into place. I mean, without that, it's chaos. It's injustice and government abuse. And the death penalty is full of government abuse and injustice. I mean, we talked about cost, innocence, the lengthy, complicated process, and how it re-traumatizes victims' family members. I mean, there's no shortage of problems here. But to compound the issues when it comes to Warren Hill is that the lethal injection drug that we have in Georgia expired. So they passed a law that said they can acquire new drugs, but it'll be a state secret where those drugs come from. So where's the transparency in government when it comes to that?
We've got another quick call I'd like to get in, Mark, before we have to let you go. Jack, you're on the air with Marc Hyden.
Yeah, get back to first principles. I have 2 points. One is, can somebody do something for which they forfeit their life? Can you commit a crime that the state demands you are no longer entitled to live? I say yes, and there are several of them. But number two, every year there are about 12 to 15,000 murders. But every year on the other side of the column, or line or sheet, there's 60 to 70 people put to death. The idea that we get upset about 60 or 70, where we just take the 12,000 to 15,000 in stride, that's barbaric. And what you guys do on that?
I understand exactly where you're coming from. Any innocent person that dies is unacceptable, and it hurts me in my heart. But conversely, with how mistake-prone the government is, especially when it comes to the death penalty, if the government puts to death an innocent person, how does that make them any different? And this is a government that many of us, I personally don't trust the government to deliver mail properly. Why are we going to trust them to make life and death decisions?
It seems to me, Mark, that if exactly what you're saying, if the government put one innocent person to death, then it's not worth it. It's not worth the death penalty process. No matter how many people who are murderers are put to death, it seems that it's better to play it on the safe side, really, and let people stay in jail if there is that potential that we can ultimately exonerate them. Tony, you're on the air with Marc Hyden.
Hi, I would like to ask Mark a question here, if possible. What about the victims' rights? I mean,
I'm glad you brought that up, because I work with a lot of victims' family members. My friend Helene in Texas had a family member murdered. My friend Pat Monks, who's a Texas conservative, had one of his best friends murdered. And all of the others that I've talked to, whether they support the death penalty in theory or not, they all say that the death penalty process, the lengthy appeals, is re-traumatizing, and it hurts them. And in the end, the death penalty does not provide closure. My heart goes out to people that were touched by death, by murder. But the death penalty won't bring closure to them. So I understand wanting to work for victims' rights and victims' family members, but this is not the way to do it.
Mark, I really appreciate you joining us. Before we go, tell us a little bit about where to find more information about your organization.
Well, if you go to conservativesconcern.org, you can sign up for our newsletter. You can learn more about us. And if you have any questions, you want to send me an email directly, send it to info@conservativesconcern.org.
Thanks, Mark. That's Marc Hyden, a national advocacy coordinator for conservatives concerned about the death penalty. I'm Drew Johnson, filling in for Jeff Stiles on Fred the Show, Talk Radio 102.3 WGOW.